Welcome to The Explainer. We hear these massive numbers thrown around on the news literally every single day, right? Growth rates, economic slumps, financial booms. But what do they actually mean? Today, we're going to peel back the curtain on the world of macroeconomics to figure out the exact mechanics of how a country truly measures its economic health.
So let's just get right to it and ask the fundamental question. When you hear about a country booming or busting, what exact yardstick are they using? I mean, you can easily pull up your own bank account on your phone to see how you're doing, but how on earth do you audit an entire nation? To figure that out, economists have built this incredibly complex framework to track every single economic heartbeat within a country's borders.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start by defining national income, figure out what exactly GDP is, compare GDP to actual welfare, look at the strict rules of calculation, and finally break down nominal versus real GDP. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, defining national income. It really helps to look at this through the lens of micro versus macro. So your personal paycheck, or say the profits of your local bakery, that's a microeconomic factor. But if we take a step back and combine every single income-earning activity across the entire nation, boom, we've got our foundational macroeconomic concept, national income. It's basically the total value of all goods and services produced by the country in a single financial year. And this is exactly why we care. This isn't just some vanity metric, it's the absolute diagnostic pulse of an economy. It answers the really big questions. Is our standard of living actually rising? Are people getting more goods and services? It tells us how rich or poor the economy truly is, and whether that growth is actually reaching everyone or just a select few. Why go through all the trouble of calculating this? Well, governments literally can't function without it. Without national income data, you can't formulate fiscal policies, you can't map out a national budget, and you definitely can't set foreign trade policy. It's the ultimate scorecard for evaluating a nation's progress and seeing exactly how it stacks up on the global stage. Moving on to Section 2, what exactly is GDP? Gross domestic product. You hear it everywhere, but the definition is actually super strict. GDP focuses specifically on the total market value of everything produced strictly inside a country's borders over the course of 1 year. Notice the heavy emphasis on market value, final goods, and geographic boundary. Those specific constraints are absolutely crucial for keeping the data accurate. Let's look at a real-world example to see just how rigid this geography rule is. Imagine a Chinese company sets up a factory and manufactures toys physically inside India. The value of those toys boosts India's GDP. On the flip side, if an Indian company manufactures toys over in China, that counts solely toward China's GDP. So when it comes to GDP, geography is literally everything. The actual nationality of the company doesn't matter at all. Let's move into Section 3, GDP versus actual welfare. This brings us to a really fascinating dilemma. If a country's GDP is shooting up, we're all throwing a party, making more money, and living our best lives, right? Well, not exactly. Relying on GDP as a pure index of human welfare reveals some pretty massive blind spots. It's a great measure of market production, for sure, but treating it as a direct translation of societal well-being, that can be dangerously misleading. Standard GDP calculations have a few glaring omissions. First up, they completely ignore wealth distribution. GDP could skyrocket just because a few billionaires made a fortune, while the average person actually got poorer. Second, it totally misses non-monetary exchanges. Think about the massive foundational value of unpaid domestic services, which are overwhelmingly performed by women at home. Because no cash changes hands, it counts for absolutely zero in the GDP. And finally, GDP completely ignores negative externalities. Let's paint a picture of how these externalities actually play out. Imagine a massive oil refinery. Every barrel of fuel it pumps out actively drives up the nation's GDP. On paper, it looks like fantastic economic growth. But what if that refinery is heavily polluting a nearby river, destroying the local drinking water and harming the community's health? That massive negative cost is never subtracted from the GDP. Because of this, GDP can actually drastically overestimate our true societal welfare. Okay, Section 4, the rules of calculation. So how do economists avoid spiraling into total chaos when adding all this up? They have a strict rule book to avoid the trap of double counting. We only count final goods purchased for direct consumption, like you buying milk and wheat at the grocery store. We completely exclude intermediate goods, like a restaurant buying that exact same milk and wheat to bake a cake. If we counted the restaurant buying the ingredients and then counted the final cake they sold, we'd be counting the same exact wheat twice. Intermediate goods are out.
Second rule, let's talk about domestic territory. Remember how we said geography is everything? Well, a nation's territory is way broader than you might think. Yes, it's the political borders, airspace, and territorial waters, but surprisingly, it also includes a country's embassies, consulates, and military bases that are located entirely in foreign countries. Even ships or aircraft owned by residents traveling between nations count as domestic territory. It's pretty wild when you think about it. And finally, who actually counts as a resident in this whole system? Basically, a resident is any person or institution living in the country for at least 1 year whose economic center of interest is right there. This means foreign citizens who live and work there for over a year absolutely contribute to the GDP. But it strictly excludes short-term tourists, people traveling just for medical treatment, or foreign exchange students.
Finally, Section 5, nominal versus real GDP.
Now we arrive at the ultimate reality check for all this economic data, the illusion of rising prices. There is a stark contrast between nominal and real GDP. Nominal GDP uses current market prices. So if prices naturally go up just because of inflation, nominal GDP is going to go up too, making the economy look falsely inflated even if it didn't produce a single extra item. Real GDP, on the other hand, strips away that inflation illusion. By using a constant base year price, it shows us the true, actual physical growth.
Let's put some actual numbers to this to see how it works in the real world. Suppose a country produced 200 cars back in 2011, and they were priced at 100 rupees each. 10 years later, in 2021, they produced 300 cars, but inflation pushed the price to 110 rupees each. If we just use nominal current prices, the growth looks absolutely huge, but a chunk of that is literally just inflation. Real GDP forces us to calculate those new 300 cars at the original 2011 price of 100 rupees. This proves actual physical production growth, stripping out all the noise of price hikes. So we've seen exactly how national income and GDP are meticulously calculated, from quirky geographic borders to smoothing out inflation. But as you look around your own city today, knowing that standard GDP eagerly counts the factory's output but entirely ignores the polluted river right beside it and completely dismisses the vital, unpaid domestic labor holding our households together, you really have to ask yourself, what is the true hidden cost of our economic growth? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the numbers, and we'll catch you next time.